Hello and welcome to American Heron Wargaming. This is a battle report for Warhammer 40k, 10th edition. After being out of Warhammer for a long time, I was finally convinced to get back into it by some coworkers. It also helped that this new faction, the Leagues of Votann, had been introduced, and I love me some Space Dwarves. So after picking up an army box, some expansions, and spending a good amount of my free time in the summer and fall getting them ready, I was finally able to get in my first game. There's definitely a high bar of entrance for 40k, and this was even just a 1,000-point match, where 2,000 is fairly common. I'd prepped for this match by watching a ton of learn-to-play videos on YouTube and battle reports from other Votann players in order to get a sense of how the army worked. My opponent had played a lot more 40k than I have, but knowing that I was a newbie, they offered to put together a list which wasn't a complete meta champ face melter, which I appreciated. I don't have their list on hand, but they were playing Dark Angels with the Vanguard Spearhead Detachment, which had a special rule which made them harder to hit if the shooting was further than 12 inches away. They had 2 squads of Eliminator Snipers, one with a Librarian attached, 2 squads of regular Infiltrator Marines, an Eradicator Heavy Weapons squad with Meltas and an Apothecary, and some Inceptor Jump Infantry with Plasma Cannons. They also had an Invictor Warsuit and a Stormspeeder Thunderstrike. My list included everything that I have painted and ready for my Oath Band: a Call, Grimnir, and 9-Hair Champion, 3 squads of Hearthkin, one with bolters, an auto rifle, and a rotary cannon. The second had bolters and a missile launcher, and had the call attached to it. The third had ion blasters, a Magna Rail rifle, and one guy with just an extra melee weapon. The Grimnir was attached to that group. I also had one squad of Berserks with hammers and a set of fists, and a squad of Thunderkin running the Graviton blast cannons. A squad of Pioneer bikes and a pair of Sagittars with missile launchers rounded out the rest. The Berserks were loaded up into one Sagittar, and the Iron Blaster squad got split, with some of the Hearthkin being loaded up in there and the Grimnir taking the rest for a stroll. Our primary mission was Vital Ground, which is relatively straightforward. You get points for controlling objective points. You get some for controlling the point in your deployment zone, more for controlling the points in no man's land, and even more if you manage to control the one in your opponent's deployment zone. We rolled off, and I was the defending player, and also the first player. Knowing that my opponent had his heavy hitters in reserve, I didn't want to focus too much in any one area, so I set up the Sagittar with the Hearthkin on board to pick up the northwestern objective, and the bikes to shoot for the southeastern, and the Hearthkin squad without an attached leader to hold the home objective. The Sagittar with the Berserks and the E-Champ, and the other Hearthkin, and the Thunderkin were all going to push for the middle, hoping to unseat it and then shift to wherever side needed the focus the most. Turn 1 felt like it fell very much in my favor. I rushed the center objective, and between the Sagittar, the Hearthkin, and the Thunderkin, the big walker toppled, which let me score Bring It Down. I wanted the E-Champ to charge the walker too, but he failed that long charge. The Berserks took some overwatch fire, but after dropping the walker, they consolidated into the Marines. I took the northwest point without any issue, though those guys weren't in any position to help much at all. The Grimnir's group pushed up, and he took 3 of his 4 wounds to sniper fire, since they all had precision. In the southeast, my bikes took a nasty round of sniper fire, with 2 bikes going down. I pulled the third one back into strategic reserve so he didn't get closed out in the next round. Though my opponent had pulled the Investigate Signals secondary mission, which he scored, and that meant that I didn't even take the full brunt of his firing units, fortunately. Turn 2 also felt like it went in my direction. I moved my units off the western points a bit, which did cause them to get ingressed by my opponent's reserves, but that's honestly kind of what I was hoping for. I wanted to know where they'd be. I cleared out the Marines in the center, and took it with the Berserks and the E-Champ. Between the Grimnir's group and the Sagittar, I was able to wipe out the Sniper Marines in the north, and kill his Librarian, which let me score Assassination and no prisoners. Moving the slow Hearthkin to the east led to no real gains, as that group was far enough to suffer the range penalty from his detachment rule. But now I had some very angry Marines in my backfield to deal with. My opponent got Bring It Down as well, and focused the Sagittar to smithereens, but Void Armor meant that they had to commit both of the full heavy weapon squad and the hovercraft. The Hearthkin holding the home objective got torn up a bit as well, but they held the line. In turn 3 I got the Teleport Homer secondary mission, and brought the remaining Pioneer Biker back from reserves into my opponent's deployment zone to score big points. The Hearthkin in the southeast advanced on the Marines, but launched a pitiful round of shooting, so didn't do much. On the western side, the remaining Hearthkin groups advanced on the Marine heavies, engaging them in melee so they couldn't easily score any objectives. The Grimnir's group in the Sagittar took on the Thunderstrike, but it still had plenty of health to take out most of the remaining Berserks. Turn 4 sealed the deal for me, and my opponent conceded after I finished my turn. For my secondaries, I pulled behind enemy lines and overwhelming force. I was able to score behind enemy lines without needing to even move anyone, so it was just a question of if I could clear some more units out. The big block in the southeast quadrant moved up and cleared out the rest of the eliminators, freeing up that objective marker. The diminished squadrons in the north and southwest didn't finish anything off, but didn't really expect to. The remaining bike and the Sagittar piled shots into the Thunderstrike, but after the barrage it had one wound left. So with more bravery than sense, the sole remaining Berserk charged it and completely whiffed his attacks. Regardless though, I was well ahead of my opponent on points, and it was getting late. Since my opponent didn't have many units left, they decided to concede rather than drag it out for longer. And that's a wrap on my first game of Warhammer 40k 10th edition. I was fully expecting to get wiped off the field, so this was a bit of a surprise. I think, though, that his more elite army had a hard time dealing with our primary objective of controlling objective points. I had a lot more units than he did, and with the Hearthkin's ability to split up with the Sagittar, it meant that I basically got a bonus unit out of it. But that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this battle report, and look forward to there being more in the future.